Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Psyched to be with you. I'm your host, Christopher Leach, aka Chimp195. It's episode 6, halfway through season 3, halfway through the year. It is the height of summer, or at least I'm assuming it will be in the future when this goes out, which you can tell if you're watching by my beautiful lavender t-shirt. We're going to be getting into an episode today, and I'm very excited because this is kind of new territory for the show in terms of what we're going to be discussing. So I'm quite excited. Get your notepads, get your magnifiers out, maybe a Sherlock Holmes fake pipe, bubble pipes only if you have one, and let's get stuck in. So all it remains for me to do is to allow you, my very special guest, to please introduce yourself. If you could tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi, Chris. So my name is Mairi Nolan, and I am a puzzle game designer based in Edinburgh in the United Kingdom. So I actually always love to introduce myself as a puzzle game designer rather than like a video game designer or like a board game designer, because I actually tend to work in every medium, but specifically the puzzle game genre. So I do some video games. I do some tabletop games. I do the Sherlock Holmes kind of things with the pipe and everything. Escape rooms, murder mysteries, pretty much any kind of game you can imagine that has that mystery or like puzzle mechanic is the kind of thing I work on. So yeah, that's me. Hi.
And for clarity, for people, I'm thinking particularly the UK audience, we're not talking about jigsaws.
No, we are not. We're talking about like logic things, brain teasers, like escape the rooms kind of mechanics. I think that's quite like an American term, right? The whole like puzzle, they mean jigsaws when they say that. But when I say puzzle, I do mean more like solving something, if that makes sense.
International audiences, you've got to try and be really clear on these type of things, just for definitely not me getting terms confused or anything like that.
That's all right.
So puzzle game designer then, can you reel off anything that you've done that we might know of, or that might ring a bell with anyone?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I've been working on a number of different kinds of projects across like video games, board games, everything. Without probably boring you and your listeners with my entire job history, I'll talk about the most recent ones. So I know you're big on video games yourself. So the last couple of months I've been working with a company called 11 Puzzles, and we've been making 2-player co-op detective puzzle games, kind of one where one person sees one side of a scene and the other person sees the other side of the scene. So by working together between what you have on your screen, you kind of have to like solve the puzzles and escape, or in this case, you're like catching the bad guys. It's called Unboxing the Cryptic Killer, and we have a free game as well, which is called Unsolved Case. So very much that kind of like detective-y style. But then also worked with a Canadian company called Mysterious Package Company, which kind of does what it says on the tin. So we make mysterious packages, kind of like board games that get shipped out to you, but more like, I suppose, an alternate reality game, which for those who don't know is like, it kind of dips into real life. So you get a mysterious letter from someone and there's a clue in the letter that takes you somewhere online and then maybe even takes you to a real life physical location. Before that, I did a bit of work with Wizards of the Coast. So a couple of things with Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, like small, like not like part of the big main games, but promotional activities. So we did like a scavenger hunt where everyone could come in like costume as part of their like D&D group and like solve puzzles and have like battles in real life kind of thing, which was a lot of fun. Um, and I guess the last one to mention would probably be Professor Puzzle, which is a board game company here in the UK who also do like more escape room games. So in lots of big shops, you see things like Escape from the Grand Hotel, Escape from the Starline Express, those kinds of games. I've worked on a bunch of ones with those as well. So really across the board, like a lot of different types of games, but all of them puzzle games. So those are the kind of things I would tend to work in. And there's smaller companies as well, but those might be the ones that you might have heard of potentially.
Okay, so this is when I sort of for transparency for listeners, I saw you tweet about being going through your podcast era as you defined it, and I was like,
Yeah, for some reason I've been doing a lot this year, but I love them to pieces. But a lot of people are interested in puzzle games right now. It's great.
so I think people know particularly if video games that are puzzle games, that's a very well known genre. Things like Professor Layton, go further
Yeah,
like Monkey Island, these type of things. And I feel like everyone kind of has probably done an escape room, right? Like everyone has probably done one. It's one of those things that maybe you do for a mate's birthday, or wedding parties. It's that type of
yeah,
activity, right? Um,
exactly. It's like instead of bowling or something, right? It's one of those. Like you go with a group of friends or colleagues.
so is it like many other things in this type of professional arena where you now can't go to an escape room and enjoy it because you just like, well, you can walk into it and go, I know exactly where the answer for this is.
Unfortunately, yes, but I will say that doesn't stop me. So it does happen that well, actually, as of now, I think I've played around 400 escape rooms. I'm a mega nerd about escape
Hold
rooms
on, I'm
and
sorry,
I
four
waste
double zero.
Yeah, 400 escape rooms in different countries all around the world. Every time I go on holiday, I drag whoever I'm with into a couple of escape rooms. So by the time I hit 400, I think I was seeing a lot of the same puzzles. And so I do have to like hold my tongue so that everyone else around me doesn't hate me in an escape room. But in terms of like it being ruined, I think not, because it's like when you get a game like any kind of puzzle game, right? It's all about the discovery, and puzzles are a medium to tell interesting stories as well. So it's never necessarily about, well, like let's say I walk into a escape room and I can hear Morse code. I do know Morse code, but I'm gonna try not to like deliberately like solve it. I'm like, wait for us to find the clue that tells us it's Morse code. But it's like the Morse code is encoding a message, and the message is important for the experience we're having because the message tells us something goes on. So it's definitely still fun to enjoy them. But yeah, people do say that like well, any discipline, right? Like let's say you studied architecture or whatever it is, you can't look at buildings in the same way because you're like, oh, that cornice, that like pillar, whatever it is. Yeah, I walk into a room or play a video game and I'm like, oh, I know what type of puzzle that is, kind of thing straight away. I still love them though. It's still my number one hobby. So even though I do have that feeling sometimes, I can't help myself but continue to play them.
So let's take that question then and flip it on its head. Have you played maybe particularly more video game-ish because you can kind of do more with the distortion of reality there, that it kind of like made you sit back and go, oh, this was great. I didn't kind of expect this.
Yeah, so I love that. The amazing thing about video games is you can do things that aren't possible in real life, which I absolutely love. Because if you walk into a physical escape room or if you open a board game, at the end of the day, it's like paper, it's bricks, it's whatever the medium is. But in video games, you can play with literally anything, right? I played this amazing virtual reality game a couple of months ago, and it was called, I think it's got A Fisherman's Tale. And without spoiling the puzzles, there are moments in the game where you are looking at a tiny version of yourself. And as you move, the tiny version of yourself is moving. So you can take things and hand them to the tiny version of yourself. And then the giant things come down. You have to like grab it and use it, and vice versa. And that was just incredible to me. Like, there's nothing like that. First of all, I don't understand how the game engine processes this so well. But second of all, just from a creative puzzle point of view, that's something I suppose a traditional puzzle designer or maybe a game designer wouldn't necessarily think of in terms of this is possible. But someone's come along and been like, what if we break the rules of reality and do something that's totally out there and totally different from anything else? So I absolutely love that game. And actually, talking about VR reminded me of another one, which is called Down the Rabbit Hole, and a very similar thing in that you play with your own size. So in the traditional Alice in Wonderland tale, she sort of drinks a potion, gets bigger and smaller. And the virtual reality game very much plays on that as well. It's not really puzzles as such, but the changing of perspective enables you to do things with the characters around you. So sort of go into a room, something's out of reach, drink the potion, suddenly you're massive and you're looking into the room and then you can move things around. And I think it's really clever as well. So massive fan of how video games do that across the board. I've mentioned two virtual reality ones because that's definitely the one that's coming to mind because I do like to work with a lot of physical spaces, and when I'm dining in an escape room, it's four walls, right? So to have a video game, you still design four walls, but every other rule is out of the box, and I love that.
I know you mentioned like the sort of co-op detective experience. I've played like We Were
Yeah.
Here Too. That's that type of thing in
Yeah.
a game where it's like it's an in-game walkie-talkie and that type of thing. I remember like I was playing that with a friend and there was this puzzle with like a wall that was coming towards you and you needed to like push the right weapon on a knight and like one person
Yeah.
was meant to be and I was like it's a sword of some description. I don't know what I don't know what flavor this is. All the words have escaped my brain because I'm under pressure. And my friend was just like, "We're not playing this anymore. This is ridiculous." And I was like, "Okay."
Oh no.
I think
I
I'm,
guess it depends who you're with, right? If you need a good communicator for those kind of games.
and I think so. This is maybe going to date myself here as a little bit old. But one of the I think standout video game puzzles that I've ever engaged with actually comes from and spoilers, Legend of Zelda, Phantom Hourglass. Um,
Yeah.
and I spent ages. It was like there was this marker on a stone tablet on a map, and you needed to get it onto your map. And I was sitting
Okay.
there going, "How am I? I'm circling it. I'm trying to make the shape out. All these things." It was only when I achieved maximum frustration, I shut my DS and sort of plonked it on my bed, did I then hear the do do do, and I was like, "Are you for real?" Because it was on the top screen, the map was on the bottom, and like all I had to do was shut my DS over.
No, but
But
that's amazing.
because it involved something in the real world, I didn't think of it because I was playing a game. So it's genius.
Yeah,
But that really stands out to me as something that I literally didn't think of doing.
yeah, that's amazing. I love that. I love creative puzzles like that. I'm actually working on one that slightly, well, I am under NDA, so I won't give any specifics, but it's going to be a mobile game, and we're very much playing around with what your mobile phone can do in terms of like you can breathe on it, you can like move it, you can balance it, you can shake it. So even though the game is playing with, it's very much a mobile game, there's a point in the middle of the game where your perception of what you can and can't do is going to break. And it's very much inspired by games like that. Because I imagine when you were playing Zelda, you never would have thought about the function of what the DS can do in your hands. And I love it when the game developers sort of challenge you around that. So that blows my mind. And I need to look for that game, although I don't have a DS, but I will look for it and I'll try and emulate it on a different device because that sounds great fun.
And I think maybe just my brain. I'm not a puzzle designer, obviously, but like I would definitely try and like I'm gonna say the term playfully, but like screw with the player, and I'd have a puzzle that just involved you like sleeping 8 hours. Like you just like you physically just can't progress until a certain amount of time has passed, just to annoy
Oh, I
people,
love that.
just to like really tick them off. Um,
I love that. Although people will try and hack it, won't they? They'll change the time on their computers or their phones. People always try and get around it.
well, I remember I saw an article about it, but there was an achievement that you can get on the Stanley Parable where you had to have an active save file for like 12 years or something, and it was like
I think the achievement was called like go outside or something like that. And it was literally something like don't play the game for X number of years, right?
yeah, and it was like I remember seeing the like this was the first date in time this was possible, and I think that's so
So,
great. Like it goes back to like even Metal Gear Solid 3, where you could
yeah.
again I won't spoil it too much because it's fun, but like there's a certain point where you can progress by changing the in-game clock, or by legitimately
Oh,
going away and coming back after a certain amount of time.
so clever. I would love to see a game that did that, but with time travel, in that, like, you made a mistake and you had to change the clock on your computer to go back and fix the mistake, but nothing prompted you, almost like an Easter egg that you could do that in a game. So I'd love to see someone play with that, but the opposite, rather than skip forward, skip back in time.
Oh, now that's interesting.
I
That's
haven't seen
interesting.
that done before, but I'm going to make a note of that for a future game.
Yeah, like almost like instead of having saves, there's just actual time. So you have to go back to
Yeah.
that point, or like put in like a specific date and
Oh,
time to return to where you were.
yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So if it was on a real clock, kind of like can't play at
Copywriting this
night,
right now, mid episode. Okay, no one can steal this. You heard it here first.
go for it. I think it's fantastic. I hope such a game exists. That is brilliant.
Sorry, I do actually have like a list of questions and a general kind of flow of the
Sure.
conversation. Um, so you've
No worries.
mentioned a little bit about what you've done, and you've sort
Yeah.
of mentioned a few of the pieces, which is really cool. Obviously, NDAs. Is there anything else sort of coming up that you want to sort of give a teaser to specifically, but preview time?
Ooh, things upcoming. Well, that is an excellent question. Probably the one thing that is coming up that by the time this airs might already be out, so it's not necessarily coming up. So I'll just say it as if it's out. It's out. I've been working on a really fun board game the last couple of months that we actually put on Kickstarter at the end of last year, and it did really, really well. But we've since been developing the game, and it's actually launching properly from the Kickstarter imminently. And the game is called Dimensions. So it's a 3D pop-up haunted house experience. And I really can't describe it any better than that because essentially you have this massive, and for people watching, they can see me gesturing my hands, but if you're listening along, I'm making big shapes in the air. It's a massive 3D pop up in that you kind of starts as a book and you open it up and you get this big 3D haunted house space. And almost like a real escape room, you get to go through those rooms and like push the little doors open and look inside the cupboards and look under the tables and stuff like that. But it's real kind of like escape room type of puzzles. So it takes a huge amount of space in the best way. And you kind of have to vanquish ghosts, fight demons, that kind of level of like the house is cursed, fix it. And it's about 10 hours in gameplay, and it took us almost a year to develop. And the fact that it's finally here, I'm just absolutely thrilled. It's been the number one thing I've been thinking about all week because I'm just waiting for this game to arrive, to actually see the final production. So that's one of the things that I'm quote marks upcoming, like it's coming up very soon, slash probably out if you're listening at home. But everything else I can think of that I'm actively working on, I am under NDA for quite a few projects, which is really annoying, but we've got the mobile game that's going to use like things in a unique way, like blowing on the phone and things like that. And I am working on a project with a book. Can't say too much about that, but that's very cool because I'm fascinated by all this. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with sort of House of Leaves or like J.J. Abrams' like books that aren't traditional books that you sort of have to twist and turn and follow threads through the footnotes and things like that. I'm helping advise on a project that's going to be a very exciting book. Unfortunately, it's not my project to announce, otherwise, I would say it,
Mm-hmm.
but that should be coming sometime later this year. Otherwise, the only other thing that comes to mind is, and 2023 is very much my year. Like, I'll be honest with you, I worked a lot last year and I did burn myself out a little bit last year. So this year I was like, I'm going to try and focus on something that is for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started work on this. I don't really know how to describe it. It's like a puzzle game that's very like simple idea, deceptively simple, just using it to kind of like test my own skills and like continue to build out. But you are on a little island and you're a little character and you're setting up a post service. So I guess a bit like the film Klaus, the Christmas one. But point being, there's this island, doesn't have a post service. So no one has addresses, no one has postcodes, and you have to, armed with your little letters and your little map, figure out who lives where and sort of learn about the people. Very simple, deceptive core gameplay loop, but like a lot of fun to work on. And I don't necessarily have any hopes for this game. Like it's very much like a fun project just for myself because it's like no one's paying me to do this. I'm under no deadline. I can just do it when I want to. And I kind of love that. I've been working a very long time just for hire. So it's nice to have something to work on myself. But who knows? Maybe I will someday finish that and be able to launch that as well.
So
So
my gut
that's kind of
reaction,
occupies.
my reaction is, where do I
Yeah.
send my money? Like, Because that, I think, to
Well, I need
me,
to finish it.
I think that appeals to like that whole kind of like that mini Metro-esque kind of player, where like you kind of
Yeah.
like you present with a problem, this island that has no
Yeah.
postal service. You have a space, make it work, connect the dots,
Yeah.
and how many ways you can kind of do that. Because I mean, I think,
Literally.
yeah, I think many people go, well, we'll create a grid, we'll give the grid letters, numbers, and then you essentially end up with like the postal code system we've got, which is
Yeah.
a spoiler for a lot of people who don't know this, not really foolproof. Postcodes are arguably some of the least important bits of your address, if you're being
Oh, yeah.
really pedantic about it. So that's really cool.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm working on in my spare time. As I say, it's just like a very silly little thing, but hopefully I'll be building a prototype this year, and then who knows, maybe I'll try and get funding and actually release it someday. But trying not to give myself any pressure on, so we'll see.
gotta let the passion projects be passion projects.
Exactly. Try not to monetize everything. I think that's a problem with today. People try and monetize every aspect of their hobbies, and eventually it gets too stressful and you might lose the joy in it. So it's important, especially with
No idea
something
what you
that's
mean. Sat on my own podcast that I do in my spare time alongside streaming and doing a PhD and all that. No idea what you mean.
oh no. Wait, this is fun. At least this is still enjoyable.
Oh, when you have incredible guests like yourself, it's a great time. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
thanks.
So I'd love to ask then, especially because you work across all mediums, which I think
Yeah.
is rare. Do you think it's fair to say that there's been a real rise in a return to like analog? I feel like board games have really resurged in popularity in the past like decade. Again, pandemic, COVID withstanding. I feel like more board game cafes have popped up, and we're seeing people wanting to engage more with like physical things. Do you think that's a fair assessment? What's your take on
I
that?
really do. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not an expert in the history of it by any means, but I definitely think we've seen that as well. And as you say, only exacerbated by the lockdown, when of course people were stuck at home for 3 years with friends, family, and needed something to do that was a little bit different. Board games took off. But definitely in the last sort of, yeah, as you say, the last decade, when I was growing up as a kid, I don't remember any board game cafes. And now I think I have three within a 10-minute walk from my flat. So for sure, something has changed. I think it might be almost, well, number one, the board games being produced today are absolutely fantastic. Coming from someone who plays way too many board games, it's unhealthy. Like people come around for a drink and I'm like, right, what board game are you playing? They're like, no, we just wanted to chat. And I'm like, no, no, we're
No, we
playing a
will
board
have
game.
fun. I have spent money on these games, and you require usually more than two people to play them. You're gonna play, and you're
Oh
gonna
yes,
like it.
organized fun. I love it. So yeah, like the kind of board games coming out, just so creative. People integrating different things, like a little bit of augmented reality, if there's sort of an app that goes with the board game, or sort of audio visual that's just so impressive. But I also think it's a little bit nostalgia. So I read something very recently which upset me a lot, and it was that CDs are coming back into fashion because of nostalgia. And I was like, hold on a minute, CDs went like where like CDs are old? What?
Okay, but like, there's no okay. No, I'm taking my glasses off for this one to try and like. I get why vinyl has like an inherent value, right? Like
Right,
I enjoy that. Like
right.
it legitimately sounds better. There is something about the crackle, about that analog.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
discs are a form of physical media that is digital. You need something digital to play it, and
Yeah.
like I don't see a benefit of why like bringing them back. Like cases are nice, jewel cases and album covers,
Yeah.
but like there's no inherent value in it. I'm confused.
Well, as I say, I had no idea they'd gone, but I think people are doing it for the aesthetic, like buying old like disc players and carrying those around instead of their like Spotify on their phones and stuff, which is wild to me. But it all to kind of say that these things, whatever they are, come in cycles. And I suppose, trying to make a big point that sort of when digital video games became more and more popular, analog games probably fell out of fashion. But as with all things, these things kind of pop up almost like a nostalgic thing. I think CDs are before their time, and I am like, oh God, how old am I? But I'm like, CDs are something that is very normal until recently, but no, apparently
I'm
they're
literally
making a
going through
comeback.
that internalized crisis like right now as we speak. Like I've pre-ordered a physical CD album like like the other week.
You're so retro. What can I say?
I'm obviously cooler than I thought I was.
Yeah, exactly. Just run with that. I agree. I mean, I still have all of my CDs, so I'm horrified. Well, maybe I can sell them to some Gen Z people. Yeah.
Um, so I think that we've had this great discussion already so far. And I feel like there's just so many different threads I want to kind of keep pulling on. I think for board games, then, what is something that you have seen that you thought was innovative?
Hmm. Interesting question. Maybe not exactly innovative because I know it's been done before, but I recently played a fantastic game that on the surface, so it's called Box One, and it's actually by Neil Patrick Harris, who's an actor rather than a board game designer, but I think he collaborated with board game designers to make this game called Box One. And try not to spoil it too much, but it sets itself up as one game. But it's a cards, it's like a deck of cards. But as you go through it, what you expect breaks, and you start to do weird things with the box. So there's like all kinds of hidden compartments in the box itself. And you would never know they're there. They're like so well packaged that you kind of reach a point and you sort of have to rummage around inside a box, lift it under, like take a pin, push something, open something. So impressive. And there's a moment as well where you have to go digital, and they just kind of do it so well that you're playing a game and you're also having a digital conversation with someone who's in the game, and it feels like real time. Basically, the creators of that game took the concept of a board game and were like, no, no, we're going to do this completely differently and flip it on its head. And it is a puzzle game. So it's called Box One because it's designed to be played by one person. Um, and they do it really well. They even play with that mechanic of being like, it's a very different experience if you play with two because it's designed for one person. So that's probably like one game that's really like impressed me recently. Is it innovative? I don't know. Like there are other board games that hide things in the boxes, especially in the puzzle industry, because when you're designing a puzzle board game, every single material you put into the box is free game for hiding a puzzle. And a lot of people do very creative things where you take the inset and you kind of fold it or manipulate it, or there's tiny text written somewhere on the box that looks like marketing copy, but it's not, it's part of the game. And I love those as well. But I think when it breaks the foundations of reality, I'm coming back to that theme with my VR games as well. When it does that, that's very impressive to me. I am blown away by games who do that. But that's the good thing about puzzle games. That's almost standard. You would expect your puzzle game to do something really fun and innovative like that.
Okay, so and apologies, this is a challenging question, but it was something you said about the text. I'm a visually impaired person.
Yeah.
I wouldn't possibly even notice that at all. You know
Mm.
what I mean? How do you think we can
Yeah.
make maybe puzzle games more accessible?
That's a really interesting question, actually, and it's a lot of things that come up in the conversations around games like that, especially with regards to a very common one, which is color blindness. A lot of puzzles involve color, and obviously that is not something puzzle game designers or board games or video games say ahead of time. You just come across that puzzle and you're like, oh well, I can't progress, kind of thing. And especially when it comes to things like, well, visual impairment, because a lot of puzzles are built with what you see. So finding something or physically manipulating or looking at a detail, or even something like those kind of puzzles where you have to sort of tilt a piece of paper and look at it at a weird angle. Like all of those require being able to see and see very like fine details. And that's a big problem because I would say a lot of the puzzle game industry probably isn't accessible. But the ones that are accessible in certain ways generally really do better because in my opinion, if you are designing for like a blind audience, and there are really good games that do. There's a escape room company in London right now which does completely blind escape rooms. So the entire escape room is pitch black, and everyone plays like that, and all the puzzles are designed to suit basically no matter how well you can see, you can still play and have a fantastic time. And they are absolutely killing it in terms of accessibility. But because that company does have to consider that, and they've made that their whole company ethos, the types of puzzles they invent are incredibly innovative. So all the usual rules that puzzle game designers do, like I'm designing a puzzle with text, for example, and you have to read a written text, completely out the door. And you have to approach it from a different point of view of like, well, what can we play around with? What other senses can we play with? Can we do like sound? Can we do smell, taste, anything else that creates an engaging story and tells an engaging narrative, I think is actually brilliant. And I think it's almost the key to making really good puzzle games is because at the end of the day, puzzle games bring people together, and puzzle games, like all games, they like I think, okay, I'm biased, but I think they are the glue that holds like a lot of like society together. Yep, I'm gonna go that big, hold society together. Um, but you don't want to exclude someone from that, right? If you don't consider people who might be deaf or blind, that's a massive portion of your audience that you're not actually getting to, and you're almost deliberately excluding. It's difficult for sure. I don't know what the solution is because I've played some excellent games that did use things that you would have to see, and I've played excellent games that didn't as well. I guess it's just having like a balance of things that everyone can access and enjoy as well.
Again, we're just chatting away, which is one of the reasons I love doing this show. Before I kind of ask a more formal question, do you have a preferred theme to your puzzles slash escape rooms? They tend to be quite thematic. Like I did a detective one. She's like a zombie one of some description, a biohazard one, and any particular
I love
favorite?
that. I love sci-fi, but that's mainly because you don't really do locks and keys in sci-fi. It's all quite high-tech and digital puzzles, and I absolutely love that. Plus, I like the peril as well. Like, my spaceship's gonna crash and I'm gonna die. I quite like that. I want the stress.
I love that we went from the glue that holds society together to my spaceship's gonna crash and I'm gonna die. And that's why it has it
Exactly. I
all.
love it though.
That's it all. So I feel like I've got to ask then, and I understand this is not going to be a
Yeah.
linear answer, but someone's listening to this going, "This is incredible! I want to do this." How did you end up in this role, making these games?
Wow, so that is actually a really big question because my career path is absolutely not traditional whatsoever. I studied my first degree, which I quit halfway, was architecture, which, okay, you can kind of see the link. But then my second one, I did international relations and I ended up majoring in law. And then I went into counterterrorism, absolutely bizarre. And I worked in that. And then I realized after a certain point that I absolutely hated it. So I quit with no backup. And I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. And that was when I got a very random job doing marketing for a software company. The software company did software for escape rooms, among other things. And that's kind of how I came across escape rooms as a concept. Tangentially, at the same time, I'm that person in my friendship group that is a little bit extra when it comes to any kind of party setting. So my friend would be like, I'm hosting a party, let's do something. I'm like, I'm going to write you a 4-hour murder mystery and everyone's going to have twists and turns. Like, I was just that person that wanted to do that. So I was making games for fun. And I think that's important as a game designer, like being able to make really silly games just for your friends and family. But I sort of did marketing for a while, and then somehow I went from marketing software to marketing in escape rooms, and then from marketing in escape rooms, then I was more and more involved in the design of the escape rooms. It started very simple. It was like, oh, we want to attract people to come to our escape rooms, so let's like put puzzles on social media. And then from that, it was like, we want to sell gift cards, but let's not just sell pieces of paper. Let's like make like a weird like jigsaw, so actual a jigsaw. And then let's put like puzzles on that. And then from that, it was like, oh, we're doing a play at home game. Let's like, and I got to be more and more involved in that. And eventually, by the time I left, I was actually working on the full physical escape rooms. And then I went to video games because I've always wanted to work for video games, and someone was very kind enough to take a chance on me, even though I didn't really know Unity or anything, taught myself everything. And then from there, I kind of went freelance. Now I work for a couple of different companies all around the world, and that was many, many years ago. And I've designed many, many games. So, how did I get into it? Absolute luck. How would I advise other people to get into it? That's a bigger question. But my biggest advice for, well, I do mentor people in the puzzle game sector. Like I'm a big advocate for, well, especially getting women into games as well. There are not enough female like game designers anyway that aren't getting like the recognition they deserve. So I do like to mentor and I do like to elevate younger puzzle designers sort of getting into it. And I always basically just recommend the same thing, and that is very easy, but just make games. They don't even have to be good. Just make anything that's in your brain, get it out on paper. Because one day you might have an opportunity, like I did, to, for example, go from marketing to design. And it helps to just have something at any level, like professional or absolute nonsense that you made for your friends and family at a party. Having some kind of portfolio that you can show people and be like, this is what I did. of course, there are degrees people can do now. I think sort of set design or video game design or narrative design, anything like that are all fantastic degrees. But even if you don't, that's not a barrier either. Puzzle games are like very niche, even within game design. So actually being able to specialize in puzzle game design is already a very interesting thing and kind of gives you this unique perspective to the industry as well. So very roundabout way of saying how I did. And to other people, just make games. Good or bad, just do it anyway, because it's fun.
Now, tell me to shut my big yazoo, but mate, just I'm gonna float the idea, but
Yeah.
I reckon I would be decent at least coming up with concepts because I do
Oh, yeah.
psychology, right? So like
Yes.
understanding how people might think in a situation might give you
Yeah.
the power to then manipulate that for the purpose of puzzles, right?
Yeah. I like that. Very true.
I mean, like it's the principle of horror, right? Like it's horror is purely psychological. It's that building of tension. So I feel like
Oh, yeah.
you know, maybe I'm not just saying I'm gonna go make out a puzzle game, right? But I'm saying like maybe like our combined powers could make something pretty impressive. You know what I mean?
Yes. I love that. We should absolutely make a game together. But yeah, the psychology slash even horror is not something I'm very good at myself. I'm more like, just here's the puzzle, have fun. But building up tension and building, like, breaking people's expectations and taking them through a path through the experience you've done and then playing with that and what someone expects to see or expects to do and then doing something different or fulfilling that unique way. I feel like, yeah, you would love that side of the game design. You should do
So to
it.
really, I'm just my brain is just going at this point. I've just done like a cog motion with my head. Like, all right, imagine something again. Like, I think you've got to subvert people's expectation. So like, you
Yeah,
maybe have like maybe an escape room or something, but then like
yeah,
have like something unexpected happen. Like
yeah.
like a member of staff, fix being injured or something. Like you maybe boring towards more like Farmageddon esque stuff, but like
Yeah.
that sort of like really like the people involved don't think this should happen, but it's actually
Hmm.
part of the experience.
That would be
Like
amazing.
imagine getting out of an escape room and thinking, yes, you've done it, and like the
And you're
building's
not
locked
done.
up and it's actually another escape room to try and get out.
That would be incredible. That's so innovative and exciting. It reminds me a little bit of one I did many years ago, and it was just a pop-up, so it doesn't exist anymore. But you got into the escape room, and it was in an office, and they were like, "Oh, the escape room's on the top floor. Go into the lift." So we went into the lift, and the lift got a certain amount, and then the lift stopped. And they were like, "Oh, sorry, hold on. Like, we'll just come and fix you." And you had a screen, and potential trigger warning here, but you had a little screen and you could sort see your games master coming out and being like, "Oh, I'll help you." And then someone walks in with a gun and shoots them. And we all started screaming because it was a horror, it was a scary game, and we were all genuinely terrified. And then after a moment, the penny drops, and you're like, "Oh, this is our game, and it's not real," kind of thing. But that moment of absolute what is real and what isn't real was just unlike anything. But I don't really like horror, so I was straight up not having a good time.
I think you definitely have to try and do it without, because I think horror is almost like the easy route, because it's easy to kind of like shock people like in
Mm,
that scenario. I'm not saying that was easy to
yeah,
orchestrate, but like trying to do in a way where
yeah,
it's not actually potentially harmful is more challenging.
yes. Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, if that had been real and someone had broken in, like we were all in danger, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, no, you didn't exactly sign up for that. I'd certainly at the very least
No.
request a refund and maybe a
Should be like,
strongly
make it
worded
stop.
email.
In the end, it ended up being a really fun experience there. So kudos to that company many years ago. I don't even know if they're still around, but yeah.
Okay then. So you're doing this, and you mentioned that you
Yeah.
play a lot of games. You're making a game in your spare time. What do you do then to unwind?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I mean, I do play escape rooms a lot, and that sounds silly to unwind to play escape rooms, but I know what you mean. That's not exactly like what I should do. So I guess when I can, I enjoy the sunny weather outside. I like to get out a lot because I work from home, so I spend a lot of time at my desk, and sometimes it's 8 a.m. and then suddenly it's 10 p.m. and I'm like, oh no, I have not left my desk all day.
Been
So I
there.
try and get out, especially now that summer's here. I live in Edinburgh now, and the winters are very long and very dark and very cold. So now that the sun is finally out, I'm walking a lot. So I actually walked up to the top of Arthur's Seat, which is like this big kind of mountain on the outskirts of Edinburgh. Actually, it's not even the outskirts; it's very near the centre. But I finally walked up that, which was a lot of fun. And then I try and stay creative in lots of fun, unique ways, life drawing, things like that. I mean, the problem with that is, though, it does bleed into my day job in that I do have to do a lot of illustrations and sketches. And then sometimes I'm doing life drawing and I'm like, oh, this reminds me of something for the game. And I'm like, no, no, I'm here to have fun. I need to stop thinking about the game I'm working on. And then the last thing I was going to say is this year I actually challenged myself to, well, do 52 books, 52 films, and well, the last one isn't even 52, the last one's 100, but the last one's 100 rejections as well. But that's more like I want to challenge myself to do weird things with people that I would never normally do. So, like, ring my friend up and be like, do you want to go skydiving? And hoping she says yes. But then if she says no, it's like one of those exciting things that, like, I was trying to get a rejection, but now we have to go and do this amazing thing that's really fun. So this year is kind of all about trying to read a lot of books, watch a lot of films, and do a lot of things that are very far outside of my comfort zone. So that's a lot of fun as well. That's kind of like what this year's when I'm unwinding is.
So have you ever skydived?
No, not yet, but that's on my list to ask a friend, and I'm very much hoping she says no. So if she's listening, please say no. Have you?
Yeah, I actually have. Weirdly enough,
How was it?
it was certainly unique. Like there are like in the UK at least there are rules like you can't just go out. They don't just kick you out of a plane.
Yeah.
You know, you have to do like
Okay.
what's called tandem. So you have to have a training
Okay.
instructor with you. There's two
Yeah.
parachutes like just for safety. Like it's genuinely
Yeah.
very safe, which sounds really daft. But like it is impressive to because if you've travelled in a plane, you get to see the world from a
Yeah.
certain vantage for a little bit. So it's that extended and that freedom of like feeling of flying like yourself, very like feels very like Dragon Ball Z. You know what I mean? Like you feel like you're the one making yourself fly, and that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things that's like so far out of my comfort zone that I do want to do before I die, but I need to kick up the butt to do it. So I'm trying to do it as part of my 100 rejections.
Nice. Also, this is gonna sound like a really, really specific like ad, and it's not. But I'm just talking about because I genuinely love it. Have you been to Camera
Yeah.
Obscura in Edinburgh?
I have actually really recently as well, and it was so much fun.
It was legitimately one of my favorite things I did when I visited Edinburgh. I was there for a weekend a couple of years ago, and like had it not been for like advanced booking because of COVID
Yeah.
restrictions, I'd have gone twice.
Yeah.
It's really good. Like, and what do you think about that? Because optical illusion plays a really cool part in
Yeah.
puzzles, right?
Yeah, for sure. So the Camera Obscura here in Edinburgh, I don't know how it compares because there's another one down south, but they have this amazing museum section that you kind of go through as you go up to the top floor, which is technically the Camera Obscura. And yeah, it was all kind of like sort of I remember this one bit, and you're like, it's like bars of mirror, and you position your face, and someone else looks through, and then the way you look through it is like your face morphs and mutates into someone else's face, and it really clever stuff. Like I absolutely loved it to pieces. I really like optical illusions in things like that, and I have worked on a few puzzles that do take advantage of that. So something called anamorphic text being like one of them, where something is kind of spread out over lots of different surfaces, and you have to stand in a very particular point in a room to be able to see all the different shapes line up to make digits or a picture or whatever it is. And I love that kind of thing. And in Camera Obscura, they had things like that, that the illusion could only be seen standing from a certain point of view. And I think that is just the coolest thing ever. I also worked on, oh, what was it? You know, those like old Victorian, like long, thin, it's usually like a theatre setup. And you look through it, and it's like they've constructed a scene, but then you look at it from the side, and it's like really long and thin, and things are getting bigger and smaller. And this is not going to make any sense on the podcast because I'm just describing something and waving my hands around. But visual optical illusions that kind of like more of like small handheld materials that people used to do for fun back in the Victorian era before they had CDs. I'm fascinated by those as well because those can be shrunk down into board games as well. Loved it. Camera Obscura was the best thing ever. Highly recommend it. You should reach out to them and get them to sponsor this episode.
I mean, yeah, hashtag not an ad. Totally would allow it to be an ad. Like, if I live by that, I
Yep.
only endorse things I actually enjoy. That was legitimately incredible. And I say that as a
Oh,
blind man,
amazing.
you know.
Oh yeah, how was that as well? Like, were there things in there that you couldn't quite experience?
I know. I think it was honestly that good, and I would actually go so far as to say,
Yeah,
as much as it's optical, it is a multi-sensory experience. Like
yeah,
being there and climbing the tower and all that, I think added a lot
yeah.
to it. And like,
That's amazing.
I,
Did you get to walk over the walkway with the
oh
spinning like
yeah,
walls?
that's really fun.
That was amazing.
That
Really
is,
trippy.
yeah.
Like
I was gonna say the only way to describe it is trippy.
you couldn't like stand up properly, or at least I felt that as I was walking through it, I thought I was going to fall over.
The thing I love about that most is that like it's just all science. It's just
Yeah,
science. It's all it is. It's just science. Like
literally.
I'm like,
It's amazing playing with how your brain interprets the signals. It's very cool.
it's scary, but also very cool. So I think the other
Yes.
thing I was like to ask, and we did touch on this with puzzles particularly. So no puzzles in this answer. Challenge question. Have you played, seen, read, or heard anything lately? Anything good? Maybe a CD, one of those old things.
A CD, gosh. Oh, have I? No, I haven't seen, read, or heard any CDs in quite a while. But that is a good question. As I say, with my 52 books, 52 films, there are a few that I watch. Well, actually, with my 52 books and 52 films, that's a mouthful. I asked people at the start of the year if they had any recommendations, kind of like
Nice.
those like desert island disc kind of thing, like what is your number one film you would recommend? And I got a lot of classics. So I recently watched things like Casablanca, and actually, my mum recommended RoboCop, and I watched that, and you know what? It was actually quite good.
Nice.
So just goes to show other people's favorite films and things like that. Um, but yeah, kind of all manner of things. I mean, I watched a very interesting film on Netflix the other day, and it was called Big Bug, and it was French, and it got really terrible reviews. And I was like, I'm just going to watch it anyway. And I actually thought it was brilliant. It was sci-fi, it was about AI, which is very much the topic of the day as well. And it was just eclectic, bright colors, absolute, like completely didn't understand what was going on at any moment, but it was an absolute spectacle. And I would highly recommend it. Even though I can see why it got bad reviews, it's very like hard to exactly know what's going on, but you know what? Best 2 hours you can spend maybe with a drink. So I really like that. And I'm actually working on a murder mystery game as well that's set in a kitchen. So I had to watch The Menu, also on Netflix, in anticipation of that. Not very good with horror, so that one scared me a little bit, but I suppose it's definitely like a classic film. So would recommend that. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, lots of films this week. I think I've watched a lot. Listened to, not so much. Read, not so much. I'm like on a sci-fi thing right now, so I'm reading through all of The Expanse, which is a lot of fun. I think I'm at like book 6, and there's something like 9 core books and like 12 mini novels, so I'm going to be on that for the next few years.
I mean, I like to sci-fi dystopia is probably my favorite genre of book.
Oh, do you have any particular favorite books within that?
So I really love. I mean, Dune is an amazing
Oh
series.
yeah,
I think what that makes is like
fantastic.
it's geopolitical, religious, kind of philosophical arguments are just
Yeah,
exquisite. You're true like
yeah,
chef's kiss there. And some classics, like I Am Legend, stuff like that. That like
yeah,
is really sort of the book's very different to the film with Will Smith. I'm sure most people sort of thought of when I said that.
right.
But like little things like that that like really sort of address like the end of humanity. Um,
Yeah,
I
that's
read I
interesting.
read Stephen King's The Stand
Oh yeah.
during 2020.
Oh,
That's not, for those that don't know, The Stand is about a virus that wipes out most of humanity and how people deal with that afterwards.
topical.
I love dystopia because I'm like the world's gonna end eventually. How will it? I want to know.
Yeah, you want to be ready. You want to like have a good sense of it, and yeah, just kind of be emotionally prepared for that.
Yeah, so I really like stuff like that like just is unafraid to look at why essentially humans will be their own downfall.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with the way the world is going. It's inevitable. So it's yeah, it's nice to kind of engage in the fiction so that you can get a heads up about all the different ways we could wipe ourselves out.
It's just it reminds me of that Father John Misty lyric of just like laughing in the dark. Just like you're just laughing maniacally in a dark room, just going, ha ha, we're all doomed.
Oh God, it's so true. Ugh,
And I'd rather sit in a dark room and maniacally laugh than maniacally cry.
exactly. Yeah, it's a lot more upbeat.
A lot more upbeat, yeah. Um, so these are, I think, two of my favourite questions, and I love asking these on the
Yes.
show. And I can maybe hazard a guess as to what your answer to this first one might be, but
Okay.
what is your big blue sky idea? You have access to unlimited resources, expertise, time, anything you want. What is the one thing you would like to do? Obviously, I imagine you're going to say like
That's
an escape planet or something. you know?
that is exactly where I was gonna go. Like an entire city that's also an escape room, and someone can book in, and they get to live in this incredible city that's so deep, full of puzzles.
So,
That would
Escape
be
from
fun.
Capitalism, the game?
Yeah, I suppose so. Although if it's a blue sky and like let's say I had unlimited money, I wouldn't even need to make a profit off it. So it would just be anyone can go. I think what I'm saying is, have you seen Alice in Borderlands? I'm probably making that, which is
Okay.
not it doesn't end well for anyone in that. It's very violent. But they do solve puzzles and it's a whole city and it looks like a lot of fun.
I was
Um,
also thinking like maybe like a Resident Evil kind of like Raccoon City. You have like an X
yeah.
amount of time to get out before the city goes kaboom.
Oh, that would be so much fun. Though without the kaboom, I don't actually want
No, no,
to
we
hurt
don't
anyone. I
actually
want people to have a
kaboom.
good time.
It's the threat of the kaboom.
But yeah, so I guess like my like blue sky would be like if I had unlimited money and space and resources, I would just make something unheard of on the scale. But knowing a project like that, I feel like it would take me the next 50 years to actually create it. So maybe that wouldn't bring me the happiness that I want in life. I don't know.
I'm going to assume yes, but are you a fan of Black Mirror?
Yes, I sure am.
Because I mean, like I might be getting the episode title wrong, but like White Bear, but as an escape room.
Oh, it's like a game show kind of thing, right? Where like she's running
So
away,
like
right? And there's an audience.
it's actually like the creation. It's a recreation of the criminal justice system, but like
Oh
she
yeah.
doesn't know it. Like actually, massive
And it
spoilers.
resets and
Spoiler tag.
oh yeah.
That was
Sorry
season
for
one. If
everyone
you
listening.
haven't seen that by now, that's on you. That came out in
True.
2010.
Very true. Definitely one of the most memorable episodes though. Oh, just like the way it resets and every time she wakes up and she doesn't know and like, over and over.
So like,
Oh, terrifying.
is that basically just two? Like, because like, if going down this hypothetical train, is our day to
Yeah.
day life not an escape room, and capitalism is the one controlling us? Too meta.
Didn't Shakespeare say all the world's a stage?
Yep.
Didn't think I'd be going to Shakespeare today. But yeah, I think the whole world and capitalism and society with our weird societal rules is kind of an escape room. But then I'm saying I want to make an escape from that. I want to make a fictional version of that. It's more fun and lighthearted, and you can get points and prizes potentially.
And actually has an escape. uh, yeah.
Exactly.
This podcast is a very left leaning, liberal, cynical perspective of life, and I'm unapologetic. Sorry, not sorry for that.
That's all good. I agree.
So obviously, like give us a little bit more though. So
Yeah.
you've got this playground, you've got a city of an escape room,
Yes.
and let's say it doesn't take you 50 years to make. Okay, what would be your ambition for it?
That's an interesting question. So, actually, what I've described, kind of a few of them do exist. So, there's this immersive experience in London right now called the Burnt City, and it's a massive warehouse space. I think it's out in sort of far East London, so they have a lot of space around there. But they've converted massive, massive amount of space into a city, and you walk through it and you interact with characters, and you kind of like follow puzzle threads and sort of follow different people. And every time you go into it, you have a different experience, but there is an overarching story happening over the course of the 2-3 hours. I think I would want to create something like that that was telling a story. And I think that if Blue Sky, I would love to do something that was playing on a popular IP already. So for anyone listening at home, like IP being like an officially licensed something based on a film or a TV series or whatever it is. And probably because I've just mentioned it, but I'm thinking of The Expanse now, and I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to have a space and recreate like a space station of some kind, and you play perhaps like some kind of detectives or some kind of like character in this world, and you don't know who else is in on it and who's like an actor and who's part of it, but you have to go through and accomplish your own goals by perhaps performing sort of did more deductive puzzles, maybe like eavesdropping, maybe like trying to like blag your way into like a hidden location and like finding keys and stuff like that. But something that was just on a bigger scale that you could really get lost and really immerse yourself, and that people want to keep coming back to and just experiencing. So more than just a puzzle game, I think I would want to tell something like a film length story where the person going through it feels like the main character, like it's their story, and then maybe the next time they come they have a completely different experience because they're doing something else in this world as well. Now, puzzles being my thing, it would definitely be very puzzly, which is why I'm kind of going to like, you're a detective, maybe you are solving a crime, and maybe you follow your own leads. You think, I think this person was involved, so you kind of follow that avenue and investigate. I think that would work really well, and I think people would really like it. But as I say, going down the sci-fi route, how amazing to have unlimited budget, to have like you look out the window and it's deep space, and maybe you have like a room with zero gravity because it's I have an unlimited budget here, I'm
Exactly.
gonna do it. Yeah, so something like that that really just takes people out, because at the end of the day, yeah, the world is kind of sucks, but that would be so much fun to just like not sit down and watch a film at home, to like go and be in the film yourself and do whatever you want within that world, solve puzzles, or sit at the space bar. I don't mind. You can sit at the alien bar and drink beer if you want. That's cool as well. But having that kind of like experience that's so immersive and so multi-layered, I think I love it. I want to do it.
I really love the idea of that as well. Of like, but it being people, you have the people at the bar who might know something, but you don't know if they're
Yeah,
also playing or not. Like, if they have, are they part of the
exactly.
experience? Are they not? Like, I love that because then you get this kind of. I'm drawing a parallel for the sake of illustration, but like almost like that MMO kind of style of thing where
Yeah,
it is about the people in the world and the world
yeah,
itself more than you just going from A to B. It's not
yeah.
just about going
And
to
it's
slay
like,
the dragon.
yeah, exactly. And the puzzles can be so much more like playful, more like deductive, more real world. Like if you were solving a case, you are essentially solving puzzles in your own way. So yeah, having the players do that kind of thing rather than like, oh, this is a Morse code cipher. What does it mean? Something a little bit more immersive and realistic as well.
That sounds great. I'm already sold. Sign me up.
I just need unlimited money first. So if you know where to find that, I'll make it.
If I do, you know, in fact, no one will know because I'll disappear. I'll just be gone.
You'll just be gone. We'll never hear from you again.
What can you say?
Don't blame you.
Um, my second favorite question then is there
Mhm.
anyone or sort of anything that you'd like to give a nod to because it inspires you, or something you just want to like, give a
That's
little
a
bit of credit
really,
to?
yeah, that's a really lovely question. I think I'm going to bring it back to something what I mentioned a little bit earlier, and it was like the people and things that inspire me are the things and the people who break the rules when it comes to what we think of in puzzle games. So, well, especially coming from me, so this sounds a little bit silly, but like I do a lot of work for hire, so for more like established game companies. And there's a lot of like, you have to make a game very commercially successful. So isn't a lot of room for breaking the rules traditionally. And I say this with mind for people like, so there's this fantastic company here in the UK called Enigmailed, and it's run by a guy called Stephen Lockyer, and he just does it for fun. So he gets to create the most amazing games, and he inspires me every single day because he'll send me a message or he'll send an email newsletter, and it'll be like, I've made a puzzle game out of an empty Marmite jar. And this was a real game he made, and I played it, and it was just like would never be commercially successful, but it was the most fun thing ever. So he had like, there was like a tea bag, and you had to cut open the tea bag, and there was like tiny details on the like fake tea that was inside the tea bag, and I had like get tweezers and like unroll it, and there was like things hidden inside the glass that I don't even know how he made. And he obviously like went and like, engraved it himself inside the box, and you could never do that commercially. And so I look to designers like him and game companies like that. And it's like, that inspires me because he had an idea. He broke the rules of what it means to make a game of this kind, and it's like a passion project, right? He just absolutely smashed it. And it inspires me because I want to work on passion projects myself. And I don't usually get to work on those kinds of puzzles because I'm under commission to do a certain game for a certain type of company that is going to make money for that company, kind of thing. That's a very cynical way. I love my clients. If you're listening to this, please don't fire me. But you know what I mean? Like passion projects. I love people who can do that. So Stephen Lockett comes to mind. He's just like a very random game designer here in the UK, probably doesn't have much reach outside of the US, but he should because his games are absolutely fantastic. And yeah, there's probably hundreds of other names I could mention. So like there's one I'm coming to mind who does a similar thing in America. She's called Rita Orloff, and she's always does Kickstarters for her games, but again, like very small release, fantastic puzzles, absolute passion project. And I just think these people are doing the things that pave the way for the next generation of puzzle creators. It's fantastic. So yeah, shout out to the people breaking the rules.
So I think this is going to be. I kind of want to tap into. You mentioned about, puzzle rooms are the glue that brings society together. That kind of really resonated with me.
Yes.
Do you think? Because again, it's that kind of stereotypical image of people think the escape room, people are having a fight and falling out. Like, do you think there's a utility for escape rooms to do good and like be like
Yes.
beneficial for us apart from just being fun?
Do. I think maybe escape room isn't the exact thing that is that because usually it's quite
Sorry,
cost prohibitive. I think the
puzzle
average.
game. I meant to say. I was just getting my words jumbled.
No, that's all good. I mean, just to say on escape rooms, yeah, very cost prohibitive. So maybe not your average escape room that someone goes for like a party, but puzzle games in general, yes, I think they have an incredible power to good for good. I think I read something a while ago, and it was about how puzzle games can be used for well are being played by older people going into their like later years in life as a way of like keeping their brains young and stuff like that. And there's loads of like it seems scientific evidence to back that up that like if you keep your mind active in a way that puzzle games do and like kind of challenge you to like think new things, you can like stay healthier for longer. There's like physical health benefits as well. I don't have the stats, not exactly my area of expertise, but I just think it's so interesting how puzzle games are this medium that is good for your health, mental and physical, but they also bring people together. And they also, I think, especially for me, were super helpful during the lockdown when people suddenly found themselves at home alone. And a lot of puzzle games are built for solo players, but also built in a way that you can potentially play online with people. Like a lot of my favorite puzzle games have solo mode and have cooperative mode online. So they were providing people that kind of like escape, that positive mood boost when you're playing by yourself, but then also a reason to meet up and sort of get together. So I had this really good friend who she lived by herself during lockdown, and every single Wednesday we got together and we played escape rooms together. And honestly, like I don't know what I would have done without her and like having that outlet. Like we would just spend the week looking for new puzzle games, new escape games, and we'd log on and we'd play them together. And it was just so good for connecting us and connecting other people. And as a designer myself, like seeing other stories like that. So like games I've worked on, I've read reviews and it was like this was like the best thing we did all week. Like we fought, we like made up, we like celebrated. And it's like, yes, that's all the things I wanted you to do. Kind of maybe not fighting, but a little bit of healthy like banter when it comes to I think we should solve it this way or I think we should solve it this way. And it's just like I think puzzle games compared to other genres have a real interesting role to play within sort of how we play together, mental health as well, in terms of like sort of improving your mental cognitive abilities over time, but also just like giving you that win when you're like playing by yourself and like giving you that escapism for an hour or whatever it is you play. Honestly, I'm biased being a puzzle game designer, but for me, puzzle games do that above other genres. And I just think that's the most special, most powerful thing in the gaming industry for sure.
So I think it's really interesting you mentioned that because I think when in like video game literature we talk about mastery. People want to feel
Yeah,
competent at games, want to feel good at them. And
yeah.
with a lot of traditional games, that's usually like by reaching an endpoint or beating a boss or these getting a really good score. And I think with puzzle games it's different because typically there's more than just one puzzle. You don't just do one thing and then you're good.
Yeah.
I think what I'd love to know is how do you calibrate the difficulty of a puzzle? Because I feel like we've all been there. You're playing it again. I'm saying particularly video games
Yeah.
myself, and a puzzle just makes no sense. It's just logic that you just can't comprehend. Then you look it up and you're like, I'd never
Yeah.
guess that ever.
Yeah.
How do you kind of manage that as a designer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think, well, what a lot we see in a lot of video games is like almost tutorializing a puzzle. So something like The Witness comes to mind. I don't know if you've played that one, but essentially it is like a series of puzzles. But the first one introduces the mechanic of the puzzle. The second one is mechanic plus, so it's the mechanic with a longer thing. The third version will have a twist, and then the fourth version will sort of require you to build on everything you've done before. I think when it comes to designing a puzzle, that for me is the gold standard. Like having incremental steps. You don't want to throw someone in with the last puzzle, the fourth step in that, because that's going to be horrible because they don't really know how it works. But giving them that journey to go through allows you to set up the rule and then break the rule in a fun way that actually gives you that like aha moment when you're like, oh, hold on a minute, this isn't what I expected. But based on what I've learned, how can I use this to still solve the puzzle? So in The Witness, it's very simple. You're like guiding little lights through like mazes, for example. And then the first few, it's straightforward. And then the second one, maybe half the maze is covered. And you're like, oh no, I don't know how to do this. So you have to solve it in a different way. And then the third one, maybe your controls are flipped and you have to solve it in a completely different way, but in an incremental way that kind of makes sense. And I think that's good puzzle game design. What you're describing with like the puzzle that never quite makes sense, honestly, I think it's just bad puzzle design. Easy to say, right? Like quite often I'm sure I've designed puzzles that people just don't get and I'm like, but how can they not get it? Like it makes sense. And that's a challenge every puzzle game designer faces. Probably the number one challenge. Because at the end of the day, if you're designing a puzzle, you're not trying to, as a designer, you're not trying to be the smartest person in the room. You're trying to make them have a good time and feel smart. You want your player to have their own aha moment and be able to figure it out. You should never use things that are like outside knowledge because you don't know. You should always try and be accessible. If it's a color puzzle, someone may not be able to solve it if they're colorblind, pure and simple. And it should be incremental. Like it should feel like small, easy wins, building up to the biggest puzzle, which is maybe a little bit harder, but uses what you've already learned in the game. That's good puzzle design. It doesn't necessarily always work out, but I think that's what us as designers should strive to create in the experiences for sure.
So you've really got to like workshop and sit there and go, how will someone break this, and how can I avoid them doing
Yes. That's a whole extra issue. That's what QA is for, to be like, here's the puzzle. There's this fantastic video that did the rounds, and it's a girl, and she's it's like was a woman. I think she's a game developer or something herself, and she's like putting blocks, or she's like supervising someone putting blocks, and like every block can fit in like the circle. And she's like it's like a star-shaped block, and she's like, put it in the star hole, and then they drop it in the circle. And it's just wild because you would think how a puzzle is supposed to be solved, and then someone just comes along and they're like, I just ran straight to the end and didn't do it. And you're like, oh, okay.
So have you ever had like, because I always like picture this happening to someone in an escape room where like they accidentally work it out straight away, right? Because like again,
Yes.
traditionally with escape rooms specifically, you're typically looking for a key that opens a lock on the door, right?
Yes.
And like,
Yeah.
have you ever had like a big puzzle game fail where like someone has just completely broken it, or like assumed a key was round and not square and just gone like, well, I don't know what I'm doing, and flip the box?
Pretty much. So maybe not anything I've designed, although something might come to mind, but
Because
I've
obviously
seen
you're
it
so
in rooms.
talented, you never design a game like that. You know what I mean?
Not at all, but hopefully I would have caught that in QA and not published that for the final game, one would hope. But I do see it in other games, so especially in escape rooms. And a classic example is you get these 5-letter locks. And let's say the room is pirate themed, and that's the final puzzle is locked by a 5-letter lock. And the other puzzles give you the different letters. But it being a pirate themed room, you can go in and go, oh, what if it's skull? Because there's a giant skull and crossbones, and put it in, and that's the right answer, and that's the final puzzle. that happens all the time with themed rooms and letter locks that are also real things. It's very easy to guess, and I see it all the time. I'm in escape rooms where it happens all the time, and you're like, oh no, I've just opened this box and this is the final puzzle. It's not good when it happens because people miss the puzzle. They don't get their money's worth in the experience. They miss all the puzzles, and then nothing makes sense. Everything's out of order. So we don't want that to happen whatsoever. But it also can happen in terms of things like, so I mentioned Morse code before. If someone knows Morse code and you have a Morse code puzzle, they don't need to solve the puzzle because they know the translation already because they know it off by heart. So the real challenge is designing puzzles that people can't do that too. And I think that's something I always try and do. Like, you use other materials in the game. So Dimensions, this tabletop 3D haunted house is what I mentioned. We do have like weird languages in it, but they're not real languages because we want players to go through that process of finding what each symbol means in the game. So they can't brute force it. They can't go to the end because it's not a language that's at all recognizable, so they can't decode it. And I think that's what we have to aim for as well. But yeah, it happens all the time when people jump right to the end.
I really am going. Regular listeners will know I kind of provide like a general kind of script for questions, and then I just kind of ham it up. This is me doing that purely, so I apologize if you've not had a chance to like preface this at all. So
Sorry?
on that logic, then do you start from like the bottom up? Do you start with like your final puzzle and work backwards? Like, is that the actual best way to do it?
Generally speaking, yes, or at least for my game design philosophy. Other people might disagree, but I always start with the final output. Like, what is the whole game working towards? What are people finding? And then I work backwards from that. So, what's the step before that? What's the step before that? What's the step before that? Generally speaking, there's two different types. There's either a linear puzzle or a non-linear puzzle. Linear being step one, step two, step three, and then I get to the end step. Non-linear being I collect four things and use them all together on the final step, kind of thing. In both cases, it's helpful to know what the final thing is. So if it's a board game, are you finding a secret word, or are you finding a key, or are you whatever it is in the physical game? Because then you know what the output for all the smaller puzzles has to be and what you're building towards and where you need to tell the story beats as well. So for me, for sure, I would start with the final thing. That said, I did mention I was working on a murder mystery right now. We still haven't decided who's the killer, and the game's nearly finished. But that's okay because they all have very good motives, but I'm working on it. So sometimes I break my own rules.
So again, from a mechanical point of view, and you see this in, I'm thinking of like the shapeshifting detective, for example. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
an FMV, full motion video game. You play as a detective that can morph into other characters to promote other conversations. Played it on stream. Check the Let's Play out on YouTube. Got to do the self promotion. Sorry, but like the whole point of that game is that the killer can actually be one of a certain number of people. So that to note, you can't just brute force it by playing again because the killer is actually on a rotation. So like,
Amazing.
you could potentially, if all of them have good motives, you could literally just be like, roll the dice, pick a card, put that in an envelope, and almost Cluedo it, and be like, yeah. So
I like
you
that.
don't know until
Replayable.
you know, yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a really good point. I'll bring that to my next team meeting.
Listen, it's a podcast. It goes. I think it's reciprocal in its exchange, you know. But I just think because I think like again maybe this is me just as someone who's a consumer, but I think the most because I love a good murder mystery course that I do psychology.
Yeah.
The most compelling ones for me is where everyone could have done it, everyone wanted to do
Yeah.
it. You know, really going for that like Hercule Poirot kind of stuff, where yeah, everyone wanted to do it, but it's figuring out who did it that is the bit that we want to achieve. And I feel
Yeah,
like
giving everyone a smoking gun and a motive, but then it's another small detail that kind of comes out at sort of the 80% mark of the game that then sort of cracks the whole thing open and actually lets you dive into. So maybe the time of death is different, so everyone's alibis are out the window. Like that's a very fun reveal in games like that, I think.
yeah, because I think like what's the fun of it? It's like, oh well, okay, it's obvious that there was one person that wanted to do it, but now we need to prove it. Like that's too much of the judicial system.
Yeah.
I want to think everyone's potentially gonna like get me, you know?
Don't know who to trust.
Yeah, because then that
Love
also I
it.
think creates that double element of like, oh, well, can I really trust that information? Or are they lying to
Yeah,
me because they want to remain hidden?
I like that. It's a lot of fun.
I also just really love like deception games, like Sheriff of Nottingham. Like, yeah, mate, just
Oh
just
yeah.
just transporting 5 chickens. There's no contraband in there, mate. No, nothing. Me
I love
distributing
it. It's a
contraband.
good
Never.
opportunity to add some humor as well, like into games like that when you have silly things like that. I love it.
So before we sort of get to wrapping up, I always like to
Sure.
do a bit of a quick fire. You
Hmm.
mentioned Desert Island Discs before. This is definitely not ripped off from Desert Island Discs. No copyright. BBC can't sue me. Um, you are going to a biodome of your choice. You can
Hmm.
describe that if you'd like to, for a rest. And to take with you, you take one album, one book,
Hmm.
one, I'm going to say, TV show or film,
Okay.
and one game. What are you taking with you? Now,
Okay.
the exceptions and rules sort of are if you can physically obtain it in one collection, you can have the whole thing.
Okay. Sounds good. I like that. How long do I have to remain in this
For,
biodome?
for as long as you want, you're on holiday.
Oh, I'm on a holiday. Excellent. So it's like a fun. It's not like this is the end of my life and I have to play this game again every single day of my
No,
life.
no, it's fun, positive, nice.
Positive. I'm not trapped. Okay, then. Good question. So, my film would probably be Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Absolutely love that. I actually have a tattoo. So, for people watching, I'm like showing like it's upside down, but one of the characters from it,
Okay,
I
yeah.
have a little tattoo of her. Um, Absolutely love that film. For my book, it would actually be one that I read quite recently, like a couple of weeks ago, and it's called How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, I think it is. And essentially, you might love it because it is dystopian kind of end of the world. But I'm picking this one because it's actually broken up into short stories. And so it's definitely a kind of book you could dip in and out of, as well as telling a really interesting, powerful story. Assuming I had not read this before, I would love to read this on my holiday. As it was, I read it sort of on trains going to and from around the UK and staring out the window, contemplating the end of the world. Like it was definitely a vibe, and I would like to reread that having read it fresh on my holiday. So that's a good one for that. In terms of album, I would say probably MGMT's Little Dark Age. I think it goes well with the How High We Go in the Dark because a lot of those songs are kind of like a little bit like darker, but like in a fun way. There's one or two that's a good like bop for a holiday as well. So it's got everything I need on it. And last but not least, I'm not going to say a puzzle game for my video game, which is highly controversial.
End the podcast. You had one job. All this talk. I love puzzle games even when I'm not working. Love them. Not taking a puzzle game.
No,
All
had
right.
enough. If I'm on my holiday, I'm probably not going to want to play a puzzle game. So my favorite game ever is like very short, very indie, and it's called Teacup, and it is about a little frog and she wants to host a tea party, but she looks in her cupboards and she's run out of tea. So all she has to do in the game is go and collect tea, and that's absolutely it. There is nothing more to the game, and it is the nicest game I've ever played. It's like a warm hug in a video game, and you can finish the whole thing in probably in under an hour. And no puzzles. I like minor puzzles in that like you have to figure out where someone is on the map to like buy the tea from them. But it is just the cutest, sweetest game ever. It's like I guess it's as much of a puzzle game as like the Stanley Parable is a puzzle game. So not really, but there's like a little bit of like finding things on the map and stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic game, even if it's not a puzzle game. But can't do wrong by Teacup. Highly recommend it if anyone wants a nice warm hug.
If you like that kind of thing, that kind of the first thing that came to my mind was something maybe around like a short hike, something like that.
Yeah, I did play that. Excellent recommendation because that is also a fantastic game. Also very short and like not like much to it, but in a good way. Like
Very,
simple,
it's
beautiful.
it's wholesome. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
It is a game that you just play and go, oh, this is lovely.
yeah, absolutely. Teacup is definitely the same vibe. And unlike a little bird, I think it is in a short hike, you play a little frog. So very cute. You can jump around. It's adorable.
So as we sort of get to the business end of the episode,
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to wrap my brain just think if there's anything else I want to ask a puzzle designer while we're here. Um, have you got like?
Sure.
And again, I understand if you can't actually answer this, but have you
Yeah.
got like a signature kind of puzzle that you go, oh yeah, I like sign that one like an artist because you're so happy that you created it.
People in the puzzle game industry do, and I swear that I can play a game and identify maybe the company, but maybe also the individual designer. So when I'm working with certain people and someone designs me a puzzle, it has their signature all over it. And I think I do have a signature puzzle, which we've woven into lots of games by accident. And without giving it away, it's deceptively simple, but people always puzzle over it in a long way. And that is having a visual where, let's say, in a scene, you have 3 loaves of bread and 2 croissants and lots of other things. But the point being, there being 3 loaves of bread indicates you count to the third letter of bread. So BRE. And then having 2 croissants is R. And just having a scene that's like totally like unassuming, but you have like a menu or something, and that tells you, oh, well, I can count 3, so it's the third letter. Da, da, da. And that takes lots of different forms. You can have an abstract pattern, and the pattern has shapes like a blue triangle, and there's like 4 of them, and maybe you're counting for triangle, maybe you're counting for blue. Like, however you want to set it up, I love putting a puzzle like that because you can skin that in any way. You can clue that in any way. You can make it obvious or you can make it really obscure. So it can be your entry level puzzle or it can be your Easter egg puzzle that you don't expect anyone to find. And I just think that is such a beautiful little idea that I can spin in any different way. I try and put it in almost every game by accident sometimes, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I need a puzzle to like fill this little gap, but like something that's not too hard. So I definitely overdo it. But it all started when, like, a couple of years ago, when someone shared this puzzle with me, and I was like, "Oh, this is like da da da," and they're like, "Yeah, I call it the Mairi puzzle," and I'm like, "What? You named a puzzle after me?" So now it's just like stuck in my brain. It's like, yeah, I use that puzzle a lot. So if you spot that in a board game, I might have worked on it.
I also love that like you mentioned like Easter egg puzzles. Like no one will probably get this. It's like a minor detail, like the color
Yeah.
of the person's shoes that like you don't expect anyone to get, but you're like, oh, we'll see if anyone does.
Yeah, I love putting those in. Putting an Easter egg puzzle in any puzzle game is great fun. It's like taking dimensions. There are tiny details I don't expect anyone to notice, and they're like extra bonus puzzles or extra bonus content that I will be shocked if anyone on the internet ever finds.
Internet, you heard it here first. Challenge issued. So this is a cheeky question, a bit risky. So I understand if you can't actually answer it again. But have you ever put something in a puzzle game that maybe you shouldn't have? Like on the sly, sort of
Ooh.
like put something like maybe like a little sort of extra or something on accident,
Yeah.
like you left something in that shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, I would say so. The funny one for me is people's names. Like, I might put a placeholder name that's like someone I know or someone I hate, and I make them not that I hate anyone, but maybe like a childhood bully or something silly like that that I leave in. And then the game goes to publish, and I'm like, oh God, I hope they never see this. Or people's photographs. So sometimes I like have to take photos, and sometimes I use my own photos from the past, and I always remember I have like a game with like polaroids from a party, and I kind of put it in as a placeholder and kind of like wrote notes for the designer, being like, we should do this, we should change this. And it just went in as is. And those are like my friends. I just never told them that, and that's terrible. They would be fine. They're good friends, but just one of those funny things that I'm like, oh, I really didn't expect that would go to print like that. But okay, I'm just going to go on with it. So somewhere there's a party photo in a game that I won't say. Maybe that's another Easter egg for someone to find, and it's you can see me in the photo and you can see lots of other people I went to school with, so that's fun.
Nice. So yeah, okay, that's excellent. That's really good.
Yeah.
Um, that is sort of pretty much all of the questions I have for you. I want to be respectful of your time. I do,
Oh.
however, like to table turn on myself for the purpose of the podcast and give you the opportunity to ask me a question. I have been asked the like biodome question, what I'm doing in my PhD, had those ones before, so, like on the podcast.
Okay.
So, any question you like to ask me?
Maybe I will ask you, do you have any favorite puzzle games? And I would like to know if like board game genre slash video game genre slash maybe even physical escape room, if you've ever done one that was particularly impressive.
So you're gonna be disappointed by this answer because I love the idea of puzzle games, but I'm crap at them. Like generally speaking, mostly because I think a lot of them rely on visual cues. That kind of puts me out a little bit. Being a bit blind and that. And I also think that like I do really like over egg my own pudding. I really sort of like go, oh, but what if it's this? But what if it's also this? When like actually I should just get into the simplicity of it and just go with it. I think probably like in terms of genre of like video games, maybe. I do enjoy that type of whodunit. Like Shapeshifting Detective is about you really. It's processing the information, thinking about the people, and those relationships. So that's
Yeah.
a bit easier to like untangle the puzzle that way. So like I'd definitely give mention to that. I know there's a few other kind of like, you know, again like we were here together, we were here too. That are like I really like that element of involving another person. What's it called? Nobody stops talking. Nobody stops talking. No one explodes.
Oh
Um,
yeah, the one about the bomb. Yeah.
like
Love that game.
that type of game. There's one where like everyone controls different parts of a spaceship as well. Like where you're trying to solve something, but you require that cooperation.
Yeah.
Um, so there's
Love it.
slightly puzzle adjacent, I guess, like sort of like deception games as well. It's like Ultimate
Mm.
Werewolf, where like
Oh yeah.
if you're a villager, you're trying to solve who the werewolf is. Um, I'd say like
Yeah.
those type of things are maybe the ones that I access more.
Yeah. Awesome.
I can
No,
tell
that's
you're
totally valid.
incredibly disappointed by that answer.
No, I love it. I think the party puzzle games are actually really valid that I hadn't really considered before. Like everything you just said, I wouldn't normally consider it a puzzle game, but I was like, actually, you know what? That's a really way of like interesting way of like thinking of One Night Ultimate Werewolf, for example. Like it is a puzzle game, but no one's designed the puzzles. It's the friends you're playing with that have created the situation to be solved. And that's really interesting to me. So actually, I love your answer. It's like nothing I've heard before. I hang out with too many puzzle people, so it's very refreshing to hear someone answer in that way.
I think one of the reasons that's fun, and you touched on it yourself, is it's the people. So like your mates, you know their tells, like
Oh
you'll
yeah,
know when they get that like their little like smear here. You're chatting mints. I've caught you now. And I think that
exactly.
adds like that richness because I think the other thing I've noticed with an escape room is that like the number of people can be quite challenging, and you can have too many people where like
Yeah,
everyone's kind of like flipping the piece of paper over, and then no one knows if they've seen this or not. That type of
yeah,
thing. Too
very
many
true.
cooks spoil the broth, as it were.
Very true. I know what you mean. I played one in Canada actually a couple of months ago, and it was it was public booking, so I wasn't with my friends, I was with strangers, and B, they fit 12 people in that room. And that just blew my mind because I think six is too much, and they somehow managed to fit 12 people in one escape room. It's definitely a cultural difference between like what would happen in the UK versus what happens in North America, but that blew my mind that someone had designed it for that purpose. So yeah.
Okay, so last sort of actual question then,
Yeah.
just came to me. What would be your number one top tip for solving puzzles? It just came to me because like you think about people, I would say four people
Yeah.
is the best number, and like
Yeah.
I would go heist movie style, like okay, this person's really good, this type of puzzle, this type of puzzle, and like pick a squad that way. How do I
Yeah, for
become a
sure.
master at puzzles?
Master of puzzles. Well, for sure, I would say to learn your genre, not genre, medium, in the exactly what you just said. If you're going into an escape room, it's not about your own personal ability to solve puzzles, it's about the people you're with. So making sure you pick the right group to go in with you. So I do play with a semi-competitive team, and we know what we can do. So we split, divide, and conquer very well, and it makes us a very good team. But if you're not playing in a team and you're just playing by yourself, I think that the best advice I can give for someone becoming a good puzzler in any genre is to expect the unexpected. And that sounds really cheesy, but the best puzzles and the puzzles that always take me by surprise are the ones that do something different. And I'll be staring at something for the longest time, and you just need another perspective. So you need to sort of have an open mind when it comes to an approaching and a puzzle in terms of like, it's not going to meet my expectations, or I'm going to pretend I'm a child and I've never seen this before. What's logical? How might I approach this? What does the designer want me to do? And then can I do it differently? Can I break like all kinds of things in terms of that? But like, this is a problem you get actually when you have played a lot of puzzle games or played a lot of escape rooms that I face all the time is I go into a room and I'm like, I know how to solve this. And when it's not, I am flabbergasted. I'm like, I don't know how to solve this because it didn't match my expectations. And I think it's like I think kids are the best puzzle solvers, and a lot of board games are like, this is for 14 plus, and I play it with like my 8-year-old brother, and he can solve things faster because he doesn't have any preconceived notions about how a puzzle should be solved. So just channeling that energy into whatever you're trying to solve is a great way to start.
Because truly, the essence of like a good puzzle is that it should guide itself.
Yeah,
Like, so you should be able to just
exactly.
lead with it. And like, I think the parallel that my brain kind of pinged off then was like a good method section of a research paper should mean you could give it to anyone and they can reproduce your study exactly how you did it. That's the point.
Yeah,
And like, really, you should be able
that's a
to
perfect analogy.
just like let anyone just like drop your preconceived notions and just, if the puzzle is good, you should get from A to B. Absolutely fantastic. My very last question for you then is, where is the best place for people to find you on said
Sure.
internet?
So
Say they want to send you some CDs, you know.
CDs. Oh gosh, please do. So I can be found on all social media everywhere under the name Mairi Spaceship. So that is Mairi and then Spaceship. Just as the word spaceship. And that's also the URL for my portfolio as well, if anyone does want to talk design. So it's marispaceship.com. I do also write about escape rooms and news and stuff, but if you go to marispaceship.com, that will be linked from there as well. So yeah, if anyone ever wants to talk puzzles, anything at all, please do hit me up.
All the links available wherever you found this episode attached. If it's the video, it's down
Perfect.
that way. If it's the audio, you clicked on it, so it's going to be involved in there somewhere. Okay. All that remains for me to say is thank you so much, Mario, for joining me. This has been a great chat. I feel like I've learned a lot. I now feel like oddly inspired to want to solve more puzzles and maybe make puzzles, which I know isn't going to end well for me or anyone around me. Um,
Should take my advice. Literally, just make puzzles, even if they're terrible. Just make them anyway, because that's a cool thing to be able to say you did, even if it's just for like your friends or family. I'm sure they will appreciate the effort. But yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely stuff. Okay, so for the video, I will find. I always lose the scene. I'll flick to the ending screen. I'll just say thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for watching. And as always, look after your mind, body, and soul. Bye bye.